I chose to write my paper on 2 Peter 2:20 through 21, and I broke my paper down into two different sections after my introduction and my conclusion, and my first one being living of the world with knowledge, and my second one being worse off than before. And Peter discusses false teachers and they're choosing to live life not according to God's will, and God commands to make disciples, and the opposite of that is disobedience. And that is where we get the false teaching in this scripture, because God or the people that were false teaching understood what it was like to live according to God's will, and we're beginning to reject and live according to the world. So the second part that I got in my paper was they were worse off than before. So the false teachers that choose to live according to the world and they choose to live life not according to God's will eventually face that in judgment one day whenever they come face to face with the Lord. There's also a similar warning also found in Luke 11, and it speaks about when Jesus was driving out demons. And at the end of the scripture, it says, and the final condition of that man is worse off than before. So obviously living according to God's will and then choosing not to is definitely worse than if you just never knew him at all. Peter's audience was saved believers. They were within his congregation. He was a servant and he was an apostle of Jesus. Therefore, he was a very well-respected man. He understood the authority that he had, and he didn't take it lightly. In his first letter, he talked about persecution outside of the church, and then his second letter, he talked about persecution within the church, which is what I focused on the most. Peter's purpose, he had three. He wanted to stimulate spiritual growth. He wanted to encourage. He didn't want to tear down, and he didn't want to discourage anybody. He wanted everyone to just grow in their faith, grow in their walk with the Lord. And in the second part, he talks about combat with false teachers, which is what I spoke on the most. And then the third part, or his third purpose, is he wanted to encourage watchfulness of God's return. He didn't want anybody to live not according to God's will, because we don't know when God's going to come back. Therefore, we need to be ready. We need to share his word. We need to live according to what he's called us to do. And like I said, 2 Peter was just a warning against the false teachers. And I'm sure there was a better way of breaking it down, but that was the way that I understood it the most, was breaking it into those two sections. So I'd love to hear y'all's opinion on my paper. So just let me know.